She can't breathe. Somebody help her. The shout cut through the laughter of the company's annual family day. People turned, irritated more than alarmed. A small girl lay trembling near the refreshment table, her face pale, clutching at her throat. Her father, the janitor everyone barely noticed, was on his knees trying to loosen her tiny uniform collar. No one moved. The crowd of executives hesitated, their smiles stiffening as if the chaos itself were indecent. A manager muttered something about calling security. Someone else whispered, "Isn't that the cleaning guy's kid?" The janitor's voice broke again. "Please, she can't." The CEO, standing near the stage with a glass in hand, frowned at the commotion. The event was meant to be a PR moment, not a spectacle. He walked over, his tone sharp. "What's happening here? Why is there shouting?" "She can't breathe," the janitor pleaded, eyes wide with panic. "Asthma. She needs—" Before he could finish, one of the assistants tried to usher him aside. "Sir, please, you're blocking the walkway." Something inside the CEO flickered. Annoyance first, then a sudden realization that this wasn't performance. It was real. The girl's lips were turning blue. He dropped his glass, knelt awkwardly and shouted for an inhaler, a doctor, anything. For a moment, the hierarchy disappeared. The CEO pressed 2 fingers to the girl's pulse as the janitor fumbled through his pocket for a half-empty inhaler. The crowd's silence grew heavy, watching a man in a suit and a man in a janitor's uniform fight the same invisible battle for air. Finally, the child gasped, the smallest sound, but enough to make both men freeze. Relief broke through the tension like light through a crack. The CEO exhaled shakily, realizing his hand was trembling. The janitor whispered a thank you that barely reached above the hush. Behind them, someone began filming. The phones rose. The whispers returned. The chaos was now content. The CEO stood, straightening his jacket, forcing composure. "Get her checked by the nurse," he ordered. Then more quietly, to himself, "This is going to be trouble." And as the janitor carried his daughter away, the CEO's eyes followed, not out of compassion yet, but out of unease. Something in that moment had shifted, and neither of them knew what it would cost. The janitor's mornings always began before sunrise. The city still half asleep. He'd tie his worn shoes, pour black coffee into a chipped mug, and whisper to himself, "One more day, Daniel, just one more." His daughter, Lily, slept curled up on the couch beside an old nebulizer that hummed faintly through the night. Every breath she took was a reminder, fragile, uneven, precious. By 6, he was already at the office building, pushing his cleaning cart through empty halls that smelled of polish and silence. He'd sweep the same floors that executives would later walk across without noticing the shine. It wasn't resentment that lived in him. It was invisibility. No one hated him. No one saw him either. He used to be an electrician before the factory closed. The janitor job was supposed to be temporary, but years had a way of making temporary permanent. His wife had passed away when Lily was 4, pneumonia that came too soon, too fast. Since then, Daniel carried 2 lives on one back, provider and protector. Every evening after school, Lily waited for him in the small cafeteria corner where he'd take his break. She'd do her homework while he mopped. She never complained, not even about the smell of bleach that clung to his clothes. Her asthma had worsened over the years, but he couldn't afford the specialist her doctor recommended. He rationed her medication, praying she wouldn't notice. When she laughed, the weight on his shoulders eased a little. That laugh was his only luxury. On the 15th floor, the CEO, Adrian Cole, began his days the opposite way. No alarms, no rushing. His assistant had the coffee waiting before he arrived. His office gleamed like a showroom of control, every pen aligned, every file labeled. To outsiders, he looked like a man who had conquered life. Inside, he was merely surviving it differently. Adrian hadn't spoken to his son in over 2 years. Divorce had split the family and left silence in its wake. He buried that silence under work, justifying every 16-hour day as necessary. Compassion, to him, was a liability. Emotion clouded judgment. Efficiency was safer. When the janitor's daughter collapsed at the event, it had unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. For a moment, seeing that man's panic had triggered something. An echo of a night long ago when his own son had struggled to breathe from an allergic reaction, and he had been too late to notice. The memory had faded, but the guilt never did. Now, sitting in his office after the event, Adrian stared at his reflection in the dark window. The noise of applause and chatter had ended, but the sound of that desperate voice, "She can't breathe," wouldn't leave his mind. Downstairs, Daniel worked a double shift to make up for the time he lost at the event. The supervisor barely spoke, only reminded him that public disturbances during corporate gatherings were bad optics. Daniel said nothing. Apologies didn't matter when people had already decided your worth. That night, Lily coughed until her small body trembled. He held her upright, whispering stories to calm her until the fit passed. Her inhaler was nearly empty. He promised himself he'd buy a new one tomorrow, even if it meant skipping meals. In that quiet apartment, his world was built from leftovers, old furniture, second-hand clothes, recycled hope, yet it was still home because of her. At the same time, in a penthouse across town, Adrian looked out over the city lights. To him, they weren't beautiful anymore. They were distractions, tiny reminders of how high he'd climbed and how empty it felt up there. Two men, living in the same world but different universes, both marked by the same wound, losing what they loved and pretending they hadn't. And somewhere between those two worlds, fate had just drawn its first invisible line, one that would soon force both to see each other for who they really were. "Mr. Daniels, the CEO wants to see you." The supervisor's voice was flat, more warning than invitation. Daniel froze mid-swipe of the mop, eyes flicking toward the glass elevators. He hadn't been to the top floor since orientation. People like him didn't get called up unless something had gone wrong. He wiped his hands on his uniform and muttered, "Tell him I'll come right away." His palms were already sweating. Upstairs, the air felt thinner. The receptionist barely glanced up as she gestured him toward the corner office. Behind that door, Adrian Cole sat in a posture that looked both casual and commanding. A neat folder lay on his desk, and his tone was polished to sound considerate. "Take a seat, Daniel. I wanted to talk about what happened at the event." Daniel hesitated before sitting. "Sir, if this is about the scene earlier, I'm sorry." Adrian raised a hand. No, you don't have to apologize. I just wanted to clear things up. I've reviewed the footage. I understand your daughter had a medical emergency. I'm glad she's stable." The way he said footage made Daniel's stomach twist. It wasn't a memory. It was a liability. Adrian continued, "You've been with us 6 years, correct? That's a long time. We value loyalty. So, the company would like to assist with your daughter's medical needs. A small gesture through our Goodwill Fund." He slid the folder forward. Inside was a check and a short form labeled non-disclosure agreement. Daniel blinked at the papers. "I don't understand. It's just a standard precaution," Adrian said smoothly. "You'd receive immediate financial help, enough to cover hospital bills and medication. In exchange, you agree not to discuss the incident publicly. We don't want the wrong narrative circulating." The words landed like quiet punches. "Not to discuss. Wrong narrative." Daniel looked up slowly. "Sir, you think I'd use what happened to embarrass the company?" Adrian sighed, leaning back. "Let's be realistic, Daniel. Videos get posted. People misinterpret. The internet twists everything. I'm trying to protect you as much as the company." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Protect me? By paying me to stay quiet?" A flicker of irritation crossed Adrian's face. "I'm offering you help. Don't turn it into something else." Silence stretched. The hum of the air conditioner filled the space between them. Finally, Daniel pushed the folder back. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but I can't sign this. My daughter's health isn't a contract." Adrian's tone cooled. "You're refusing assistance."
"I'm refusing silence," Daniel said quietly. "She almost died, and now people are talking like it's bad publicity instead of a child's life."
The CEO studied him, surprised by the calm defiance. Few people ever spoke to him that way. Something about Daniel's steady eyes made him feel exposed, like the janitor could see the emptiness behind his professional empathy. Adrian tapped the folder. "Think carefully. I'm offering generosity, not punishment." Daniel stood. "I think generosity shouldn't come with conditions." He turned toward the door. Adrian's voice followed, sharper now. "You understand the consequences of rejecting a formal offer?" Daniel paused without looking back. "Yes, sir. I also understand the cost of losing my dignity. It's higher." When the door closed, Adrian sat motionless for a long time. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. He told himself he'd tried that the man was being prideful, but the truth scraped at him. He'd seen real fear in that janitor's eyes, not greed. Later that evening, Adrian called his assistant. "Make sure HR has documentation that I extended help. Send him a copy for his records." The assistant hesitated. "Should I follow up with PR?" "No," Adrian said, rubbing his temples. "Not yet. Let's keep it quiet." Meanwhile, Daniel rode the bus home in silence. The folder weighed on his lap even though he hadn't taken it. The city blurred outside the window. His reflection stared back, tired, worn, small. He'd turned down money his daughter needed. Was that bravery or foolishness? He didn't know anymore. At home, Lily was sketching in an old notebook, the oxygen machine humming beside her. "How was work, Dad?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Long day. But you'd be proud. I said no to something I shouldn't have said yes to." She grinned, not understanding but sensing the pride behind his words. "You always do the right thing." Her faith stung and healed him all at once. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He replayed the meeting over and over. The CEO's calm control, the condescending kindness, the folder, the form, the feeling of being a problem to be managed, not a father fighting for his child. And somewhere across the city, Adrian also lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by a single question. Why did that man's refusal bother me so much? Because deep down he recognized the same wound. The need to be right when all he wanted was to be forgiven. Neither of them knew it yet, but that conversation had just set off a quiet war between pride and conscience that would soon tear open both their worlds. "Daniel, they need you in HR, now." The call came 2 mornings later, right as he was mopping the lobby tiles. The tone wasn't casual. It was the kind of tone that told him something had already been decided before he arrived. He parked his cart near the elevator and took the long ride up, each floor number blinking like a countdown. When he entered the HR office, the manager avoided eye contact. A second person, someone from legal, sat beside her with a stack of files, and then the third voice came through the speakerphone, cold and polished. "Adrian Cole." "Mr. Daniels," the HR manager began. "We've received reports regarding last week's incident during the family event." Daniel's stomach sank. "Reports? About my daughter's attack?" "About the circumstances," the legal advisor interjected. "It's been suggested that you failed to follow safety protocol while on company premises. You were on duty." "Correct." "I was cleaning near the main hall," Daniel said carefully. "It was family day. Staff were allowed to bring guests." The HR manager folded her hands. "Even so, you were responsible for your dependent's safety. There's concern that your actions or lack thereof may have endangered her and disrupted the event." Daniel blinked in disbelief. "I was trying to save her life," the legal voice cut in smoothly. "We understand that, but from a procedural standpoint, there was still a breach. The CEO has reviewed the situation and approved a temporary suspension pending investigation." His chest tightened. "Suspension? For 2 weeks, unpaid," she added quietly, sliding a paper across the desk. "We recommend you use the time to focus on your daughter's health." The irony stung deeper than any insult. He signed the acknowledgement form silently, hands trembling. As he stood to leave, the speakerphone clicked off. Adrian didn't say a single word to him directly. Outside the HR office, whispers followed him down the hallway. Someone murmured, "That's the guy with the sick kid." Another voice laughed softly. "Figures, always drama from the bottom floor." By the time he reached the maintenance area, his ears were burning. Shame wasn't loud, it was heavy. It pressed into every step. That night he sat across from Lily at their small table. She noticed his silence immediately. "Dad, why are you home early?" He forced a smile. "They gave me time off." "Because of me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. He shook his head quickly. "No, sweetheart. Because they need to review some rules. Nothing to do with you." But she saw it in his eyes. The lie, soft and kind, still a lie. She looked down, tracing circles on the table with her finger. "I shouldn't have gone with you that day." He reached across and held her hand. "Don't ever say that. You didn't do anything wrong." She nodded, but tears were already slipping down her cheeks. "I made trouble for you." For the first time in years, Daniel didn't know how to comfort her. He'd fought every day to give her a sense of safety, and now the world had shown her how fragile that safety really was. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Adrian signed the suspension memo without hesitation. It was standard procedure. He told himself. Nothing personal. HR had insisted they maintain consistency for all employees. A small child's asthma attack had turned into an online clip viewed thousands of times. The board wanted control before the narrative spiraled. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes briefly. For a moment he saw the janitor's face again, pleading, desperate, and then the image shifted into his own son's face from years. When he'd missed the boy's school recital because of urgent business, he shook the thought away and called his assistant. "Make sure the janitorial department gets coverage during Daniels' absence. And send a wellness card for the daughter. Keep it discreet." It sounded good on paper, professional empathy, but when the assistant left, The silence in his office grew too loud. Adrian poured himself another cup of coffee just to have something to hold. Downstairs, Daniel spent the following days trying to find odd work. Painting fences, fixing leaky taps, anything to keep the lights on. Every job reminded him of what he'd lost. Not just income, but dignity. The people he used to nod to in the halls now looked away. Few were kind, whispering that they knew it wasn't fair. Most stayed silent, afraid to be seen taking sides. One evening, he stopped by the building to pick up the rest of his cleaning supplies. The security guard, an old friend, gave him a sympathetic look. "They said you endangered the event, Danny. But I saw the video, you were the only one doing something." Daniel exhaled slowly. Sometimes truth doesn't fit into reports. The guard nodded. "Be careful, once the higher-ups decide something, it's hard to undo." Outside, the night air bit at his skin. He watched through the tall glass windows as the cleaners moved through the halls he once cared for. The floors still shone, but to him they looked like mirrors reflecting the wrong man's shame. At home, Lily left a drawing on his pillow, a stick figure of her holding hands with him. Underneath she had written in crooked letters, "You're my hero even if they don't see it." He stared at the paper for a long time before folding it carefully and slipping it into his wallet. For the first time, the exhaustion inside him turned into something harder: resolve. He didn't know how yet, but he was done being invisible. And somewhere in a glass tower across the city, Adrian Cole would soon discover that humility doesn't end a story, it begins one. The city didn't stop for broken people. It never had. Daniel woke before dawn, not because he had somewhere to go, but because silence hurt more than exhaustion. For years work had kept his thoughts busy. Now the absence of it echoed like an empty hall. He sat at the kitchen table, tracing the wood grain with calloused fingers, the smell of bleach still faint on his hands. The unpaid suspension was supposed to be temporary, but no one from HR had called since. He'd checked his inbox every day anyway, knowing it wouldn't matter. The world had already moved on from his story, except for the few people online still debating whether the company handled the incident properly. He'd stopped reading the comments after the third night. One line had been enough. Maybe he shouldn't have brought his kid to work. Now he did odd jobs, fixing fences for neighbors, painting old porches, carrying groceries for tips at the corner store. It wasn't pride anymore, it was survival. Each coin felt heavier when he thought about Lily's medicine. At home, she'd grown quieter. The cough had worsened, more frequent now, especially at night. He'd wake to her gasping softly in her sleep, and the sound would freeze him mid-step. The inhaler was nearly empty again. One night she asked him, "When can I come to work with you again?" He smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. "Soon, sweetheart. When things are calmer. People at your office don't like us, do they?" she said softly. He froze. The question wasn't angry, it was observant. "They just don't understand us yet." She nodded slowly. "Mom said understanding takes time." He swallowed hard. She was right. When she fell asleep, he sat by her bed and whispered, "I'll fix this. Somehow." But he didn't know how. Across the city, the story refused to die. A local blog had leaked a photo, grainy, taken from someone's phone, showing the moment Adrian Cole knelt beside the collapsed girl. The caption read, "CEO forced to play hero after company neglect leads to child's medical scare." By morning it was everywhere. Headlines questioned the company's safety policies, their treatment of staff families, their moral compass. The PR department flooded Adrian's inbox with drafted statements and crisis responses. He sat at his desk reading each one, none of them sounding human. "We are deeply concerned. We are reviewing procedures. We value every employee." Empty words stacked like bricks, building a wall between truth and responsibility. His assistant entered, hesitant. "The board wants you to make a public comment, sir." Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose. "About what?" "That a man's child almost died because everyone in this building froze." The assistant faltered. "They think you should frame it as community outreach. Emphasize the swift response." "Swift response," he repeated under his breath, the phrase tasting bitter. "We didn't respond swiftly, we hesitated." He turned toward the window. The skyline glittered outside, each light a symbol of something built on silence. "Draft something minimal. I'll review it." When she left, he sat there in the quiet hum of the office, the sound of the girl's choking echoing in his mind. For days, he'd been trying to forget it, to bury it under meetings and statements, but now, replaying it, he realized something that unsettled him more than guilt in that moment. He hadn't seen her as a child. He'd seen her as a problem. The words "she can't breathe" had been background noise until it became unavoidable. until it became too human to ignore. He leaned back, closing his eyes. His son's voice came unbidden from memory, smaller, younger. "Dad, you missed it again." The recital, the project presentation, the soccer match. Moments he had excused as business priorities. He rubbed his temples. For the first time in years, the titles, CEO, leader, visionary, felt like hollow armor. He'd built an empire to control chaos, but it had only isolated him from compassion. Meanwhile, Daniel tried to stretch what little money he had left. He'd pawned his old watch, the one his wife had given him on their 10th anniversary, telling himself it was temporary. He picked up night work, warehouse cleaning, window washing, whatever paid in cash. He didn't complain, but fatigue showed in the way he moved. His back ached constantly. His hands, once steady, now trembled when tightening screws. One night, as he scrubbed graffiti off a convenience store wall, a group of teens walked by laughing. One of them pointed. "Hey, that's the guy from the video, right? The janitor with the kid?" Daniel froze. Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, I saw that clip. Didn't they fire him?" They weren't cruel, just careless. Their laughter faded down the street, but the words stayed. He pressed the rag harder against the wall, the sting in his hand grounding him. He finished the job and sat outside for a while, staring at the streetlight above. It buzzed faintly, moths circling the glow. He thought about how people saw him, a brief story, headline, then nothing. By the time he got home, Lily was asleep again, breathing shallowly. He touched her forehead, cool, but weak. Her drawing still hung on the fridge. "You're my hero," he whispered. "I don't feel like one." Please. That same night, Adrian couldn't sleep either. He sat in his dark office, long after everyone had gone home. The city outside pulsed like a heartbeat. He replayed the moment again. Daniel's eyes, the panic, the trust that flashed for 1 second when their hands both steadied the child. He hadn't realized it then, but that look, raw, desperate, had been a mirror. Both of them had been trying to save someone. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then put it down. What would he even say? "Sorry I suspended you for trying to save your daughter." No apology would sound genuine from a man in a $2,000 suit. He rubbed his face, exhaustion sinking in. For the first time, he wasn't sure if leadership was strength or just well-dressed denial. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the glass with silver lines. It blurred the city into something softer, quieter, like the world itself was tired of pretending to be hard. Adrian sat there until the sky began to lighten. The event, the video, the outrage, none of it would disappear easily. But maybe, he thought, the real damage wasn't public. Maybe it was what silence did to the soul. Across town, Daniel woke to the sound of Lily coughing again. He rushed to her side, patting her back gently as she tried to catch her breath. The inhaler hissed once, weakly, almost empty. When she calmed, she whispered, "I'm okay, Dad." He nodded, forcing a smile. But when she turned away, his face broke into quiet panic. He stared at the inhaler, then at the small jar of coins on the table. It wouldn't be enough. He sat down, hands pressed together, whispering a prayer into the dim light. "Please, don't take her too." And miles away, the man who'd once held all the power whispered a prayer of his own. Not for profit, not for reputation, but for a second chance to be human again. Neither of them knew it yet, but those prayers would soon collide where guilt, grace, and truth would finally meet. The message came on a rainy afternoon. Adrian was halfway through a quarterly report when his assistant knocked softly and said, "Sir, you should see this." She placed a tablet on his desk. The headline read, "Child from viral company incident admitted to city hospital." Underneath was a photo, grainy again, clearly taken by someone who'd recognized Daniel in the waiting room. He sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped in helpless prayer. Beside him, a small girl with an oxygen tube slept against a hospital pillow. Adrian's chest tightened. The caption twisted the knife, "Former employee's daughter critical after medical complications." He closed the tablet slowly. "Who leaked this?" "No one's sure," the assistant said. "It's already spreading." He didn't respond. Instead, he stood and reached for his coat. "Cancel my next meeting." "Sir, the board." "I said cancel it." He didn't even grab an umbrella. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. When he asked the nurse for Lily Daniels, her eyes flicked up sharply, recognizing him. "You're from that company," she said softly, not kindly but not cruelly either. He nodded. "I need to speak with her father." She hesitated, then pointed down the corridor. "Room 24-2. but don't stay long. He's been through enough. The words stung more than he expected. When he reached the doorway, Daniel was sitting by the bed, his back to the door. The girl was awake now, fragile but alert, tracing shapes in the blanket with her finger. He hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Daniels." Daniel turned slowly, disbelief flashing into anger. "What are you doing here?" Adrian stepped in quietly. "I read about your daughter. I came to see how she's doing." "You came to protect your company," Daniel said flatly. "Don't waste your time." Adrian took a breath, steadying himself. "I'm not here for the company. I'm here because I should have come sooner." The words sounded foreign, even to him. Daniel stood, his exhaustion disguised as defiance. "You already did enough. You suspended me, remember?" "I remember," Adrian said. His voice lowered, losing its corporate polish. "And I regret it." For a long moment, only the beeping monitor spoke. Lily stirred, looking between them. "Dad, who's that?" Daniel's face softened for her sake. "Just someone from work, honey." Adrian managed a small nod. "Hi, Lily." She blinked up at him with sleepy curiosity. "You were there that day, right? When I couldn't breathe?" He nodded. "Yes, you were very brave." Her lips curved into the faintest smile before she drifted back to sleep. The room felt smaller once her breathing steadied again. Daniel sighed and sank back into the chair. "I don't want pity, Mr. Cole." "It's not pity," Adrian said quietly. "It's guilt." Daniel looked up, surprised by the honesty. "At least you're honest about it." Adrian stared at the sleeping girl. "She looks like my son used to, when he was little." Same way of frowning in her sleep. "He's 20 now. We don't talk." The confession came out before he could stop it. Daniel frowned. "Why?" "I made work more important than people. By the time I realized it, he'd already decided I didn't belong in his life anymore." He paused. "When I saw your daughter collapse, it reminded me of everything I failed to be." Daniel studied him for a long moment. There was something raw in the CEO's tone that didn't sound rehearsed. "And what now? You came here to clear your conscience?" "No," Adrian said. "I came because I didn't know what else to do. I've spent my life fixing problems with money or rules. This time, neither works." The words hung between them, brittle, but real. Daniel rubbed his eyes. "Money might have helped before the hospital bills piled up." "I'll cover them," Adrian said immediately. "No," Daniel cut in sharply. "You'll offer forms, conditions, signatures. I don't want that." "I won't," Adrian said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. "No forms, no publicity, just help." Daniel shook his head. "You can't fix a system that was built to ignore people like us with one kind act." "I know," Adrian admitted, "but maybe I can start by not being the reason it stays that way." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy with the sound of two men realizing how little control they had over what truly mattered. Lily coughed weakly, breaking the tension. Daniel instinctively adjusted her pillow, his hands gentle, practiced. Adrian watched quietly. That small act of care hit him harder than any accusation could. He finally said, "You're a good father." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I try to be. That's all I can do." Adrian nodded slowly. "That's all any of us can do." For the next hour they sat in the same room, not as CEO and janitor, but as two fathers who'd both failed in different ways. The machines hummed, the rain outside softened, and for once neither man had the strength to perform the roles they'd built around themselves. When the nurse entered to check Lily's vitals, she looked startled to see Adrian still there. "Visiting hours are almost over," she said gently. Adrian stood. "Thank you, nurse." She hesitated, then gave Daniel a small nod before leaving. Adrian turned back. "I'll make sure the company's insurance covers her treatment retroactively. No paperwork this time. Just take care of her." Daniel looked at him skeptically but didn't argue. "Why are you doing this now?" "Because I should have done it then," Adrian said simply. "And because—" He stopped, then added quietly, "I think your daughter reminded me what being decent actually looks like." Daniel's shoulders dropped. "You think decency fixes everything?" "No," Adrian said, "but maybe it's where we start to forgive ourselves." The words hit something inside Daniel. He didn't want to acknowledge. He exhaled slowly, the fight in him softening. "You can stay until she wakes if you want. She likes company." Adrian nodded. "Thank you." For the next few minutes, neither spoke. They just listened to Lily's slow breathing, the rain against the glass, the distant footsteps of nurses changing shifts. And in that fragile quiet, something unspoken bridged the distance between them. The understanding that behind every title, every uniform, every wall of pride, there was the same simple truth, that no man is immune to loss, and no heart stays stone forever.
When Adrian finally left, Daniel didn't thank him. He didn't have to. The silence said enough.
For the first time since the collapse, neither man felt completely alone. The visits began quietly. No press, no entourage, no corporate assistants taking notes. Just Adrian slipping through the side entrance of the hospital every few evenings with a paper bag of food or a small box of toes for Lily. The first time, Daniel didn't even look up when the door opened. "You don't have to keep coming," he said, voice low. "I know," Adrian replied, setting the bag on the table, "but I want to." Lily peeked from behind the blanket, smiling faintly. "You brought soup again?" Adrian nodded. "From the same place you liked last week." She grinned. "That's the good one. My dad never buys soup that's not on sale." Daniel rolled his eyes, a ghost of a smile breaking through. "She's honest to a fault." "Honesty's rare," Adrian said softly. "You should be proud." After that, the visits became routine. Sometimes they talked about Lily's progress, other times about nothing at all. The weather, the nurse who scolded everyone like a drill sergeant, the vending machine that always ate coins. But with each passing evening, the air in that small hospital room changed. The tension that once filled it like smoke slowly cleared, replaced by something quieter, respect born from shared weariness. Adrian arranged for a private specialist to oversee Lily's care. He insisted it be handled anonymously, through the hospital's community fund. Daniel found out only because the doctor mentioned a corporate sponsor had approved extra medication at no cost. When Daniel confronted Adrian the next day, he didn't deny it. "She needed it," was all Adrian said. "I told you I didn't want pity," Daniel replied. "This isn't pity," Adrian said. "It's responsibility." Daniel studied him for a long moment before saying, "You really don't know the difference yet, do you?" Adrian's smile was faint, almost sad. "I'm learning." Over time, the conversation stretched longer, spilling into late nights when the hospital corridors went quiet. They stopped talking like opposites and started talking like men who'd been on the same losing side of life. One evening, Daniel told him about Maria, his late wife. "She worked at a daycare," he said, staring at his hands. "Kids loved her. She used to bring home little drawings they made for her. Said every crayon line was proof the world still had good in it. She was like that, always saw the best in people, even when it wasn't there." He laughed softly, a sound laced with grief. "She used to dance with Lily in the kitchen while dinner burned. That's the kind of mom she was." Adrian listened, saying nothing. His face was still, but his eyes softened in ways that words couldn't fake. "She got sick fast," Daniel continued. 3 weeks from cough to coffin. I thought working extra hours would buy her more time. It didn't." The room went quiet. Adrian looked down at the floor, his voice quiet. "I missed my son's high school graduation. He texted me a picture of his diploma and said, 'Don't tow. I found someone to take the photo you were supposed to take.'" Daniel glanced at him, startled by the vulnerability. "You ever try to talk to him again?" "Every birthday," Adrian said. "Every year he doesn't answer." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe he will one day." Adrian's tone was hollow. "Maybe I don't deserve it." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You'd be surprised what forgiveness can look like. Sometimes it's just showing up, even if they don't want you there." That night, for the first time, they laughed together. Not because anything was funny, but because for a brief moment the heaviness lifted. Two tired fathers sharing broken stories, finding pieces of themselves in each other. As the weeks went on, Lily improved. Her color returned, her breathing steadied, and her laughter filled the room again. She'd tease Adrian about his expensive shoes and how out of place he looked sitting beside her father's worn jacket. "Do CEOs even eat sandwiches?" she once asked. Adrian smiled. "Only the ones made by people who don't like us." Daniel chuckled. "Then you've probably had plenty." Each visit ended the same way, Adrian standing at the door, hesitating as if unsure whether he'd earned the right to say goodbye. Daniel would give a small nod, silent permission, and that was enough. Eventually, even the nurses began treating them as a familiar trio. They'd whisper, "The CEO's here again," but not in judgment anymore, in quiet admiration. One evening, Daniel found Adrian sitting by Lily's bed long after she'd fallen asleep. The CEO's shoulders were slumped, his phone dark in his hand. "You okay?" Daniel asked. Adrian nodded slowly. "Just thinking how strange it is, all my life I've been surrounded by people and somehow I've never felt more seen than in this room." Daniel took a seat beside him. Maybe that's because here, nobody needs anything from you. Adrian smiled faintly. Except Soup. They both laughed quietly, careful not to wake the child. After a moment, Daniel said, "You ever think maybe we're all just trying to do one thing right before it's over?" Adrian looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "Yeah, I think this might be mine." When he finally stood to leave, Daniel said something he hadn't planned. "You're not the man I thought you were." Adrian paused at the door. "Neither are you," he said, with something like respect in his voice. And when the door closed behind him, Daniel realized it was the first time in months he didn't feel like an employee talking to a boss. He felt like a man talking to another man who understood the weight of love, loss, and the fragile mercy that connects them. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew a fragile bridge had been built between two broken lives, and for the first time, it didn't feel like pity. It felt like beginning. It started with a headline again. Leaked. CEO secretly funding sick employee's child company image move or guilt trip. By morning it was everywhere. News alerts, finance blogs, even social media influencers picking apart what they called the sympathy strategy. Someone had leaked the hospital records and donation trail. The article framed it as a carefully staged redemption campaign after the company's earlier scandal, complete with anonymous quotes from internal sources. Adrian Cole's name was plastered beside words like exploitation, cover-up, and damage control. In truth, there was no PR strategy, no staged visits, just quiet evenings, soup deliveries, and the sound of a little girl's breathing returning to normal. But in a world built on perception, truth came second. When Adrian arrived at the office that morning, the building felt colder. Conversations stopped when he passed. His assistant looked shaken. "The board's calling an emergency meeting," she whispered. "They think your involvement has reignited the controversy." He clenched his jaw. "Who leaked it?" "They're saying it came from someone on the inside, possibly Whitmore." Adrian exhaled sharply. Of course it was Whitmore, the board member who'd always accused him of being too sentimental for corporate optics. "Get me the boardroom in 10, he said. Daniel didn't see the news until later that day. He was leaving the hospital to buy groceries when his neighbor caught him at the bus stop, phone in hand. "Hey, isn't this your boss, the one helping your daughter?" The image on the screen made his stomach drop. There was a picture of Adrian exiting the hospital, a half smile caught in bad lighting. The caption twisted everything. "CEO poses as savior in PR move after firing employee, over same incident." By the time he got home, his phone was buzzing non-stop. Unknown numbers, news outlets, even someone claiming to be from a workers' advocacy podcast. He shut the phone off and sat on the edge of the bed. His chest felt tight. He wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the photos, the tone, the sudden attention all looked too deliberate. Was it possible? Had he been just another project to fix the company's image? The thought felt like betrayal cutting through trust he didn't know he'd built. "Sin." The board meeting was brutal. "Do you realize what this looks like?" Whitmore's voice boomed across the table. "You've jeopardized our brand again by secretly involving yourself with that employee's family." Adrian sat still, his tone controlled but low. "I wasn't involving the company. I was helping a child." "Don't be naive," another director snapped. "When a CEO acts, it represents the company. There's no personal when cameras exist." Whitmore leaned back with a smirk. "The media thinks you staged the entire redemption arc. We can't afford another PR wildfire. The shareholders are already demanding a statement." Adrian felt heat rise behind his eyes. "So I'm being punished for doing the right thing." "The right thing doesn't matter if it looks wrong," Whitmore shot back. "You should have known that by now." The words echoed long after the meeting ended. By the afternoon, the company released a sterile press statement. The CEO's actions were conducted independently, and without board authorization. "We remain committed to transparency and ethical conduct." It was the corporate equivalent of washing their hands. Adrian stared at it on his computer screen, each word another nail sealing a coffin around his intentions. He had wanted to do one human thing, and somehow it had turned into a scandal. At the hospital, Daniel was called into the administrator's office. A representative from the company HR department was waiting there too, holding a clipboard and wearing a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Daniels," she began, "we're aware of the recent publicity involving you and Mr. Cole. The company is under immense scrutiny. It would be best for all parties if you issued a brief statement, clarifying that you had no ongoing relationship with Mr. Cole and that his actions were unsolicited." Daniel frowned. "You want me to lie?" She adjusted her glasses. We want you to protect your position. Public sympathy can turn quickly. If people think you were part of a publicity scheme, it reflects badly on you as well. A simple statement clears the air. He stared at her in disbelief. He helped save my daughter's life. She sighed. And now he's costing both of you your reputations. Sometimes loyalty means knowing when to distance yourself. Daniel's voice hardened. You people don't understand loyalty at all. Her tone didn't change. Think it over. If you cooperate, there might be an opportunity for reinstatement. When she left, Daniel sat frozen. The words unsolicited, cooperate, distance echoed in his mind like accusations. He felt the old shame crawling back, the same kind that came from being invisible and spoken for. By evening, the news anchors were dissecting every gesture Adrian had ever made at company events. Old photos resurfaced, old mistakes reinterpreted. Headlines called him the CEO who cried charity. Daniel switched off the television halfway through. He sat in silence, the low hum of the oxygen machine filling the room. Lily stirred weakly in bed. Dad? Why are you mad? He looked at her fragile frame and felt his chest twist. Because I thought someone cared, but maybe it was just business again. She frowned. He didn't look fake when he brought soup. The words stopped him cold, out of the mouths of children. Truth unpolished, pure, but anger doesn't let go easily once it finds a wound. That night, Daniel drafted a message to the board contact who'd given him a business card weeks ago. I'll give a statement. He typed it, deleted it, typed it again. When he finally hit send, he didn't know if he was saving his dignity or selling it. Nurse. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the hospital and noticed the security guard's glance. Hesitant, almost wary. When he reached the room, the door was closed. Through the glass, he saw Daniel sitting beside the bed, expression unreadable. Adrian knocked softly. Daniel didn't move. They said you're not supposed to be here. Adrian's chest sank. Who said that? The people who pay both our bills, Daniel said bitterly. You should go. Daniel. No. He finally looked up. Eyes red. I believed you, Adrian. I thought you were different. But you turned my daughter's sickness into another headline. That's not what happened, Adrian said firmly. Someone leaked it. I've been fighting it all day. Daniel laughed, a small broken sound. Of course. Always someone else's fault, right? That's how it works up there. Adrian stepped closer. Please. You know me better than that now. I thought I did, Daniel said, voice cracking. But people like me don't get to know people like you. We're just stories you fix for reputation points. Lily stirred at the sound, whispering. Dad? He softened instantly, touching her shoulder. Go back to sleep, honey. Adrian watched, torn between staying and walking away. He finally whispered. For what it's worth, I never wanted this to hurt you. Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at the sleeping child, jaw tight. Then you shouldn't have come into our lives at all. Adrian stood there a moment longer, waiting for anything to mend the silence between them. But it didn't come. When he left, the nurse in the hallway avoided his eyes. The air felt colder again, like all the warmth of the past weeks had vanished. That night, both men sat in different rooms of the same city, staring at the same headlines, both feeling betrayed, one by the world, the other by himself. The bridge they'd built, fragile and human, had finally cracked, and this time neither knew if it could be rebuilt. 3 days passed in thick silence. The hospital room that had once been filled with laughter now felt hollow. Daniel barely spoke except to the nurses. He hadn't seen Adrian since that night, and the ache of betrayal sat heavy on his chest. Every time the news replayed that smirking photo of the CEO outside the hospital, it twisted deeper. Lily was improving, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her what was happening outside those walls, that the man she'd come to like was being torn apart in headlines and boardrooms alike. She was too young to learn that kindness could be weaponized. On the 4th morning, Nurse Karen came in quietly, glancing toward the hallway before closing the door behind her. Mr. Daniels, she said softly, I need to show you something. Daniel frowned. Is something wrong? She hesitated. Not wrong. Just forgotten. She handed him a small tablet, playing muted footage from the hospital's security cameras, a copy from the night of the company event. Daniel watched, confused at first, until he saw it, his daughter collapsing, the crowd hesitating, and then Adrian Cole dropping his glass, kneeling instantly, pressing 2 fingers to the child's neck, beginning CPR. The others stood frozen. Only one man moved. Karen's voice was gentle. He didn't know anyone was recording. He was shouting for help, for oxygen. He saved her before the paramedics even arrived. Daniel's throat went dry. Why are you showing me this now? Because people forget too easily, she said. He didn't ask for credit. He asked us not to mention his name in the report. But with all that noise online, I couldn't let them destroy him for doing the right thing. She left the tablet on the table and walked out quietly. Daniel sat frozen. The video replayed on loop, every frame hammering against the guilt rising inside him. He remembered the way Adrian's hands had trembled after the girl gasped back to life. The shock, the relief that hadn't looked like performance at all. He had believed the worst again, believed what the world told him about men like that, powerful, heartless, calculating. And now, watching the truth, he realized what it had cost the man to care in a world that rewarded indifference. Lily stirred in her bed, blinking awake. Dad, he turned the screen away. Hey, sweetheart, go back to sleep. She smiled faintly. I had a dream Mr. Cole brought soup again. Daniel's eyes stung. Maybe he will. At that same hour, Adrian was alone in his office. The nameplate was already gone from the door. A stack of boxes sat half filled with files, family photos, a few awards he didn't even remember accepting. The blinds were drawn, the once pristine office stripped of power. He had refused the PR team's offer to clarify the misunderstanding. The board's decision was final. Resignation effective immediately, pending quiet settlement. The official reason: misuse of company resources and breach of image protocols. He signed the papers without protest. It was easier than fighting a battle that would only turn uglier. There was a knock at the door. Come in, he said, not looking up. Daniel stepped inside, holding the tablet. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them was heavier than the silence. I saw the footage, Daniel finally said. The night she collapsed, you were the only one who moved. Adrian looked up, tired eyes meeting his. I didn't know there was footage. There was, Daniel said softly. You saved her life. Adrian gave a small shrug. I did what anyone should have done. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. That's not true. No one else did. Adrian's gaze dropped to the box he was packing. Doesn't matter now. The board thinks I used you. The public thinks I used her. Maybe that's what I get for trying to be human in a place that doesn't allow it. Daniel stepped closer. And you didn't fight back? What would that fix? Adrian asked. They'd say I was defending my ego. I've spent 20 years talking. Maybe it's time I stop. Daniel looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beyond the tailored suit. A man stripped of armor, standing in the ruins of everything he'd built. You know, Daniel said, when my wife died, I blamed the doctors, the weather, God, anyone, but mostly myself, for not being there when she needed me most. Took me years. You realize some things you just can't fix with explanations. Adrian gave a tired smile. Guess we both learned that too late. Maybe not too late, Daniel said quietly. You gave my daughter a chance to breathe again. Maybe that's what you needed too. For the first time in weeks, Adrian laughed, a quiet, broken sound that carried more truth than all the corporate meetings he'd ever led. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper Lily had drawn months ago, the stick figure of her holding his hand. He unfolded it and placed it on the desk. She drew this the name you saved her. Said I was her hero. She didn't know she had two. Adrian's eyes softened. Keep it. No, Daniel said. You need it more than I do. They stood there in silence, two men who had started on opposite sides of a world built on hierarchy and fear, and somehow met in the middle, where dignity and humanity finally overlapped. As Adrian taped the last box shut, Daniel asked, What'll you do now? He exhaled slowly. Maybe go see my son. I don't know if he'll open the door, but I'll knock anyway. Daniel nodded. He will. Maybe not the first time, but he will. Adrian smiled faintly. And you? Back to work? Daniel shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But I'll keep floors clean somewhere. It's what I know. Adrian looked at him with something like pride. You make things shine, Daniel. You always did. Don't ever think it went unnoticed. Daniel's throat tightened. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were the coldest man alive. Adrian chuckled softly. You weren't entirely wrong. Now I think maybe you were just tired of caring. Adrian met his gaze. Yeah, but not anymore. They shook hands, firm, real, wordless. A silent truce between guilt and grace. When Daniel turned to leave, Adrian called out, Tell Lily I'll bring the soup next time. Daniel smiled over his shoulder. She'll be waiting. As the door closed, Adrian stood in the quiet office for the last time, sunlight spilling through the blinds. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful or defeated. He just felt human, and somehow that was enough. The auditorium buzzed like a disturbed hive. Camera crews lined the back wall, lights glaring off polished marble floors. Employees whispered in clusters, voices hushed but restless. The company had called for a town hall meeting to address the growing scandal. The CEO's alleged manipulation, the leaked footage, the moral collapse of leadership. The board sat in a neat, self-righteous row on the front stage. Whitmore, ever the puppet master, adjusted his tie and whispered to the PR head, "Once we confirm his resignation, we issue the new leadership statement. Keep it clean." Adrian stood to the side of the stage, not on it. No jacket, sleeves rolled, a shadow of the man who once ruled this building with precision. He looked neither angry nor defeated, just empty, like someone who had finally stopped pretending he could fix what was broken. The company spokesperson stepped up to the microphone. "We appreciate your attendance. Today's meeting is about clarity and accountability. The board has reviewed the recent events involving Mr. Cole and an employee's family. While intentions may have been good, the impact on our corporate image has been severe." The sentence cut off mid-air when a voice echoed from the back. "That's not true." Heads turned. Daniel Daniels, the janitor who had become a headline, a talking point, a symbol, walked slowly down the center aisle. His uniform pressed but worn, his eyes steady. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had no pass, no invitation, but when he entered nobody stopped him, maybe because something in his face said he wouldn't stop even if they tried. The spokesperson stammered, "Sir, this is a private—" "No," Daniel said, voice rising but calm. "It's not private anymore. You made it public the moment you turned a father's pain into a story for ratings." A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras pivoted toward him. Whitmore frowned. "Security." Adrian's quiet voice broke in from the side. "Let him speak." The words froze everyone. Daniel walked to the stage and turned to face the crowd. His voice was low at first, shaking from nerves, then steadier with each word. "You've all seen the headlines. You've heard that this man," he gestured toward Adrian, "used my daughter's illness to save his reputation. You've heard that he turned tragedy into publicity, that he's just another CEO trying to clean his image." He paused, scanning the faces. Executives, employees, journalists, strangers. "But what you haven't heard is the truth." A journalist raised her phone. "And what's that?" Daniel exhaled, eyes glistening but clear. "That he saved her life. When my daughter stopped breathing that day, everyone froze. Everyone looked for someone else to act. He didn't. He got on his knees, performed CPR, and stayed with us until she took her first breath again. I didn't even know his name back then. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't ask for cameras. He just helped." The room went silent except for the hum of equipment. "I thought he was cold," Daniel continued. "I thought people like him don't care about people like us. And for a while I hated him for being part of a world that let my daughter suffer while others got bonuses for looking the other way." His voice cracked slightly. "But I was wrong. Not about the world. It's still unfair, but about him. He showed up when no one else did. He paid for her treatment quietly, and when the world started tearing him apart for it, he stayed silent. Not to protect himself, but to protect us, because he knew speaking out would drag my daughter's name through the mud again." Gasps rippled through the room. Even Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. Daniel stepped closer to the microphone. "So if you're here looking for a villain, look higher than him. Look at the system that rewards cruelty and punishes compassion. Look at the people who mistake silence for guilt, because we've forgotten what humility looks like." The board whispered among themselves. The PR team began typing frantic notes, but the cameras stayed on Daniel. He turned to Adrian. "You once told me you wanted to fix what you broke. You already did. Not by saving my daughter's life, but by showing me that decency still exists in places I'd stopped looking." Adrian's eyes met his, glimmering with disbelief and gratitude. Daniel looked back at the audience. "I don't work here anymore. But before I walk out, I want you all to remember this. Leadership isn't about control. It's about courage. And sometimes courage means doing the right thing when it costs you everything." The room erupted in murmurs, not of skepticism this time, but of reflection. People looked at Adrian differently, as if seeing the man behind the title for the first time. Whitmore stood abruptly, trying to regain control. "Mr. Daniels, while we appreciate you—" But the interruption died as another voice called out from the crowd. One of the younger employees. "He's right." Then another. "We all saw the way the media twisted this. Let the man speak for himself. The murmurs turned to voices, then to applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. Adrian stepped forward finally, the first time he'd addressed a crowd without a script in years. "I don't deserve this defense," he began quietly. "Mr. Daniels is right about one thing. I stayed silent, not out of strength but because I was ashamed. I let pride and fear dictate how I led. I wanted to fix everything with control, and in the process I forgot that leadership without humanity isn't leadership at all." He looked at Daniel. "You reminded me of that." Daniel shook his head. "You reminded me too," Adrian continued, voice growing steadier. "I'll accept the board's decision to step down, but I hope when you think of this company, you remember not the scandal, not the headlines, but the moment we decided to see each other as people again." He turned to the board. "If this is the end of my career, I can live with it. Because for the first time in 20 years I'm proud of something that doesn't fit neatly into a quarterly report." The room broke into applause, not the polite, forced kind executives use to end meetings, but a genuine swell of emotion. Whitmore tried to speak again, but the sound drowned under the rising claps. Someone from HR stood, then another, and then half the employees were on their feet. Even the journalists lowered their cameras for a moment, realizing the story they came for was no longer about scandal. It was about redemption. The board conferred briefly, panic flashing in Whitmore's eyes. He whispered to the others, but the noise of the crowd grew louder. One of the senior board members finally leaned toward the mic. "In light of new information, and the testimony we've just heard, the board will formally review the terms of Mr. Cole's resignation." Whitmore snapped, "This isn't procedure." But the older man cut him off. "It's humanity, Whitmore. Maybe you should try it." Applause thundered again. Adrian stood frozen, unsure what to do. Daniel gave him a small nod, the kind of nod one man gives another when words are useless. The crowd's energy shifted from judgment to empathy. People who had looked at him with suspicion now approached with quiet handshakes, small smiles, a sense of restored faith in something bigger than business. The same building that had once humiliated a father and condemned a leader now stood as a stage for truth, and the janitor, who had nothing to gain, had become its unexpected moral compass. As the meeting ended, Adrian turned to Daniel. "You didn't have to do that." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, I did. You would have done the same for me." Adrian chuckled softly. "You're giving me too much credit."
Daniel shook his head.
"No, I'm just giving it where it's due." The two men stood side by side as the room emptied. The reporters shouted questions neither of them answered. They didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for them. As they walked toward the exit, the crowd parted quietly. One of the younger employees whispered to another, "That's the janitor." And the other replied, "No, that's the man who told the truth." Outside, sunlight spilled across the steps of the building. Adrian paused, taking in a long breath, one that felt like his first in years. Daniel looked up at him. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" Adrian nodded slowly. "Yeah, it feels like breathing again." They both laughed softly at the unintentional echo of the words that had started it all. And as they stepped into the light, the applause still echoing behind them, neither man knew what came next, but for the first time they didn't need to. The storm finally passed, but not in the way either man expected. A week after the town hall, the official statement came quietly: Adrian Cole to step down voluntarily after 12 years of leadership. No scandal, no scandalous phrasing, just a closing line that read, "To focus on personal priorities and new beginnings." For once it wasn't corporate spin, it was the truth. Adrian cleared his desk without ceremony. The office that had once defined his worth now felt like a museum of someone else's life. He didn't feel loss, only release, a quiet kind of freedom that came from setting down armor he'd carried too long. He didn't call reporters. He didn't post statements. Instead, he drove straight to the address he hadn't visited in years, his son's house. He sat in the car for 10 full minutes before knocking. When the door finally opened, a young man stood there, arms crossed, expression guarded. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Same sharp jawline, sames that gave nothing away. "Dad?" Adrian nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's me." The silence between them felt heavier than all the board meetings he'd ever led. "I heard about what happened," his son finally said. "You okay?" "I will be," Adrian said. "I just came to say I'm sorry, not for the headlines, for everything before them." His son didn't reply right away. Then quietly, "Do you want to come in?" For the first time in years, Adrian smiled without forcing it. More than anything. Inside, they sat over coffee neither of them drank. The conversation was awkward at first, then fragile, then real. They didn't fix everything that day, but the door stayed open when Adrian left, and that was enough. Across town, Daniel got a call he hadn't expected. "Mr. Daniels," a woman's voice said from the other end. "This is from the Community Education Trust. We've received a scholarship recommendation for your daughter, Lily, under the new Family Fit program. Full coverage, books, tuition, supply." Daniel blinked. "That can't be right. I didn't apply for anything." She smiled through the line. "Someone else did." He didn't need to ask who. Later that week, an envelope arrived. No logo, no signature, just a simple note in familiar handwriting. "You gave me my first real lesson in decency. I thought I was helping you, but it turns out you were saving me. Consider this a thank you for reminding me what matters. AA." Inside was a photo of Lily from the hospital, smiling, healthy, sitting upright in bed with the words "Keep breathing" written on the back. Daniel folded the note carefully and placed it beside his wife's picture on the shelf. He kept his word. "Maria," he whispered, "you'd like him now." That night, Lily jumped into his lap with her acceptance letter. "Dad, they said I got in. A full scholarship. You don't have to clean extra anymore." He laughed, pulling her close. "I might still clean, it's in my blood, but you don't have to," she insisted. "No," he said softly. "But sometimes we do what we're good at, not because we must, because it reminds us who we are." She smiled and rested her head against his chest. "You think Mr. Cole will visit again?" "I think he's got a lot of people to visit," Daniel said. "But yeah, one day." At the company headquarters, things began to change quietly. There were no big announcements or flashy PR campaigns, just subtle shifts that rippled through policy. Paid family leave doubled. The Goodwill Fund was restructured into a transparent employee support program. No NDAs, no conditions. The HR department launched an initiative called the Cole Standard, focused on ethical leadership and compassion in management. No one in the building ever said it aloud, but everyone knew why. Whitmore eventually retired early. The board found new faces, and somewhere in a side corridor, a new plaque appeared on the wall, in honor of those who remind us that integrity begins with humanity. Underneath, two small engraved names, Adrian Cole and Daniel Daniels. No. Months later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, a car pulled up to a modest suburban home. Daniel was trimming the small hedge by his porch when he saw it. The door opened, and Adrian stepped out, dressed simply, no entourage, no hesitation. Lily was in the yard, chalk in hand. She gasped. "Mr. Cole." He smiled, kneeling beside her, drawing. "You still like soup?" She giggled. "Only if it's not on sale." Daniel watched from the porch, shaking his head with a quiet grin. "You're late. I saved you the cheap one." Adrian chuckled. "Fair trade." They sat outside together for a long while, watching Lily draw on the pavement, bright swirls of color forming shapes that looked like hope. "You really did it," Daniel said after a while. "You walked away." "I had to," Adrian replied. "Turns out the corner office isn't worth much if the people you love won't talk to you." Daniel nodded. "And your son?" Adrian smiled faintly. "He answered my call yesterday. We're starting small. A coffee next week." Daniel raised his cup. "That's a good start." Adrian looked out at the chalk drawings. "So is this." For a while they said nothing more. The wind carried laughter from the yard. The two men sat in quiet understanding, not as CEO and janitor, not as savior and saved, but as fathers who had helped each other remember what it meant to care. When the sun dipped low, Adrian stood. "I should go. Soup's getting cold." Daniel smirked. "Then you finally know how I feel after every shift." They both laughed, the kind that comes from healing, not humor. As Adrian walked back to the car, Lily ran up and handed him a piece of chalk. "Draw something before you go." He crouched down, thought for a moment, then drew a small heart beside her name. "So you remember, kindness leaves marks too." She nodded solemnly as if she understood more than he realized. Daniel watched him drive away, the quiet settling around him like peace instead of emptiness. He looked at the chalk heart glowing faintly under the evening light and smiled. Somewhere, in a world that had once measured worth in profits and power, two men had learned that the rarest kind of success was simply learning to breathe again together. The school auditorium was small, but to Lily it felt like a stage built for something far greater. The banners hanging from the ceiling read "Essay Contest, What Kindness Means to Me." She stood nervously behind the podium, her paper trembling slightly in her hands. From the back row, Daniel watched, hands clasped tightly. It wasn't the coughing fits or the hospital monitors he remembered now. It was this, his daughter standing tall, breathing steady, voice clear. The miracle was in her normalcy. And a few seats over, almost hidden in the corner, sat Adrian Cole. No one recognized him, not as the former CEO, not as the man whose name once filled headlines. He wore a simple gray sweater, his hair a little longer, his posture relaxed. For once he wasn't analyzing, leading or defending, he was just listening. Lily took a breath and began reading. My dad says the world doesn't get better because people have power. It gets better because people choose kindness, even when no one's watching. The audience went still. Teachers leaned forward. She smiled faintly, her voice steady. When I got sick last year, I learned that kindness can save a life. Not just medicine, not just help, but real kindness. The kind that doesn't ask for attention or credit. Someone once told me that power makes people remember your name, but kindness makes them remember your heart. Daniel's throat tightened. He glanced toward Adrian. The man's eyes glistened behind his glasses, and for a brief second, they exchanged a look, an entire history of pain, forgiveness, and quiet gratitude, gratitude in a single nod. Lily continued, my essay isn't just about one person, it's about two. My dad, who never gave up on me, and someone who helped us when he didn't have to. They both taught me that kindness isn't about what you give, it's about how much of yourself you're willing to share. Her voice softened near the end. People remember power, but healing changes more lives. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Daniel stood, clapping through tears he didn't bother to hide. Adrian clapped too, quietly but with a smile that carried peace rather than pride. Afterward, as the students crowded around Lily to congratulate her, Daniel walked over to the back row. Didn't think you'd actually show up, he said with a grin. Adrian chuckled softly. I promised her I'd come if she ever spoke in public. She kept her end faster than I did. She's got her mother's courage, Daniel said. And her father's heart, Adrian replied. You did good, Daniel. Daniel shrugged, smiling. We both did in our own messy way. Adrian nodded toward Lily. She's proof that the world can heal if someone just decides to start. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the crowd of children and parents laughing, clapping, taking pictures. No press, no boardrooms, no noise, just the quiet aftermath of something right. As Adrian turned to leave, Daniel called after him. You ever think you'll go back? Business, I mean. Adrian smiled, shaking his head. I think I'm already where I'm supposed to be. He hesitated, then added. My son's working with me now, non-profit stuff. Small scale, we're helping fund free health clinics. He said it was my turn to listen for once. Daniel chuckled. Sounds like you raised him right after all. Maybe he raised me, Adrian said. They shook hands one last time. Not in farewell, but in continuation. As Adrian stepped out into the evening air, he looked up at the sky. The same golden hue as that day in the boardroom, only softer now. For the first time, the weight in his chest was gone. He had spent a lifetime chasing the idea of legacy, and it turned out legacy wasn't about buildings or companies. It was about people who breathed easier because you existed. Inside, Lily was still surrounded by classmates. Daniel smiled and thought of all the years of struggle that led to this single perfect moment. Maybe that was the real reward, not winning, not revenge, not proving anyone wrong, just seeing something broken become whole again. And as the narration faded, it carried one final truth, the one the story had been building toward from the very first breath. Compassion isn't weakness, it's the highest form of leadership. The quiet kind that doesn't need applause, only the courage to care. Have you ever seen kindness change a heart? Tell us where you're watching from, and one word that describes how this story made you feel.